Hey friends, hey, welcome back to the show. Today's episode is extra special because we are switching things up with a podcast swap. My very first podcast swap ever. I'm sharing an episode today from the podcast To Tell You the Truth, hosted by Brittany Sharpton, who is one of my Podcast Moguls coaching clients. She completely revamped and relaunched her show after working with me on her podcast. And I'm so proud of Brittany for walking in her truth and bringing these bold, authentic conversations to the forefront. To Tell You the Truth is all about unpacking these truths that we live with and we rarely say out loud, maybe in the group chat, right? But everything from relationships and career to wellness and personal growth, we tend to keep under the vest. We put on this mask. But now Brittany is dismantling all of that, starting with the conversation with me. Brittany takes once taboo conversations out of the group chat and into the world with humor, honesty, and heart in a way that only she can. And here's the thing about me, right? I know I host a podcast, but I prefer to stay on this side of the mic. Yes, I do. I like to ask the questions. I don't like to answer them. So only Brittany could get me in the guest chair, and the interview was so well done. It gave me the chance to share my story in a way that I haven't before. I shared stories that I've never shared, my true thoughts and feelings and opinions in this moment, in this phase of life. And whether you're new to Side Hustle Pro or you've been rocking with me from day one, this is a great way to remind yourself of my own story, my own side hustle journey. I'm in the side hustle journey every day with y'all. All right. So listen to my interview on To Tell You the Truth. And you can check out To Tell You the Truth on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And if you want to learn more about becoming a Podcast Moguls group coaching client, head over to sidehustlepro.co/live class because my next podcast training is coming up very soon. Now let's get right into my conversation with Brittany Sharpton on To Tell You the Truth.
Welcome, Nikayla.
Thank you for having me. I am happy to be here.
I am honored to have Nikayla here. It's special that the topic of today's conversation is about overcoming and identifying self-imposed barriers. And I thought about last night, just me sitting here recording this is, you have no idea. I mean, you have some idea in terms of the mental hurdles that it took for me to get here, but I'm excited, and it's going to be a fun conversation.
I'm so proud of you. It is. And I know about those mental hurdles. Like, I remember launching my podcast itself, or just even before interviewing some guests. So we could talk about that. But I think the more that we train our brains, the easier it gets. But I don't know if it ever goes away.
That's true. It's like exercise. You got to keep going. Mm-hmm. So, Nikayla, for people who may have been living under a rock and don't know all the amazing things that you do, can you share your journey? Well, Nikayla is the amazing host of Side Hustle Pro. She is also a coach and entrepreneur extraordinaire who helps other aspiring podcasters get out of their own heads, break their own glass ceilings, and start their shows and journeys. So can you share with us a little bit how you transitioned from the corporate grind to doing your own thing, boss woman?
Yes. And thank you so much for that intro and reminding me of what I do. Wow. The corporate journey was super windy for me, right? Where do I begin? I was born in Jamaica, grew up in the US, specifically the Bronx. So that's definitely shaped the person I am today, because I grew up really just seeing a lot of different sides of America, living in New York, being able to see extreme wealth, but also living in the Bronx and seeing circumstances that were not fair, or, people having different opportunities. And I was always determined to go out there, get everything I could get. But it also defined me in a way that I've always had to affirm myself and remind myself who I am. And thankfully, I grew up in a family where they've always affirmed me as well. But in different spaces, for example, coming from the Bronx and going to a specialized high school called Bronx Science, or then going from Bronx Science, which was still kind of sheltered because I was around all kids who grew up in New York. There was a certain level of down-to-earthness that we all shared. And then going from there to go into an Ivy League school at University of Pennsylvania and having a complete culture shock and just feeling again, having to affirm myself and remind myself, like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, I belong here, even if I feel different. So those were some of my early beginnings. It shaped me. I am someone who has always loved writing, has always loved arts, crafts, entertainment, media. And so I studied communications at University of Pennsylvania. And from there, I have dabbled in all parts of marketing and communications. I worked for several years at MTV and then ended up at a startup called Ideal doing social media marketing. And from there, decided to go back and get my MBA to understand business a little bit better and to really have the confidence to move and start my own business and move about the world in the way that I want to. So came out of Michigan, super pumped, thought I was going to get this big time job at Google where I interviewed and ended up not getting the full-time offer after my internship. Was totally crushed, totally bummed, moved back to DC to live with my then boyfriend, now husband at the time. And that is where the side hustle Nikayla began, because I went back to side hustling and I started the beginnings of a blog that would eventually become my podcast. And so I'm in DC. This is back in 2015. I'm in DC. I'm unemployed. I'm trying to figure my life out because here I was with like this MBA, a background in communications, a background in business, and I'm in Washington, DC, public policy, politics capital, and I don't want to work in any of that. I don't want to work for your nonprofit. I don't want to work. I'm like, I want to be back in tech. I want to be back in, the places that I saw each and every day at business school. But so it took me a while to really find my footing. And while I was finding my footing, I was able to side hustle in a couple of ways. Like, thank God, a program that I was a part of called Management Leadership for Tomorrow. They hired me as a social media consultant. So gave me a check. Shout out to MLT. I always love y'all for that. And then I also started up my blog again and started promoting myself. And initially, I was just trying to get hired, right? So I was trying to say, hey, I'm this marketing analyst. Look at my digital mind. And I was completely bored to tears. So I started gravitating to interviewing people, which still allowed me to network because I was still on the job hunt. So I was networking with people who were working in all these cool spaces, from like tech to marketing to entertainment, learning their stories, sharing their stories on my blog. And all the while that I was doing that, I eventually ended up getting a full-time job at NPR, National Public Radio, leading their digital media, social media marketing, serendipitously enough for their podcast. And also, I was also realizing, hey, these interviews need to become a podcast. And I kept side hustling when I was at NPR until I eventually launched a podcast. From there, I grew the podcast, and we could talk more about that. And after a year and a half of working for NPR and side hustling on the podcast at the same time, I was able to quit my job to become a full-time podcaster, educator, content creator, and all of the titles I now give myself.
Thank you for sharing, Nikayla. I even learned certain things in this story.
Yes.
But I just think it's so fitting that for this topic, you highlight and spotlight Black women entrepreneurs. And I happen to consult with aspiring entrepreneurs and small business owners who are stagnant in growth, want to make more money or cut down on cost. So I find it like that's probably an area that a lot of times people come to me with this gigantic made up barrier in their mind. And just for context, obviously, there's tons of systemic barriers, especially for Black women entrepreneurs in terms of like access to capital and loans and funding. So I'm not discounting that. But I found a lot of times people, myself included, come to me, hey, I need help with this loan package, or I need $1 million, $100,000, all these things that would be wonderful, but you don't need that to start. So how has your experience as obviously an entrepreneur yourself, but just hearing all these amazing and inspiring stories from side hustlers who, like you said, took passion project to profitable. How does the intro go?
From passion project to profitable business.
Right, there it is. So that's just such for most people, not everyone wants to like work for themselves. Some people are perfectly fine with the stability of a 9-to-5, but I found that to be a really big hurdle with a lot of people. So Can you touch upon some of the lessons that you yourself even learned from your guest?
Yes. So it's funny you should say some people want the stability of a 9 to 5, because the biggest thing I've learned in this journey, both from my guests and just from experiencing entrepreneurship, is there is no stability. And that's not to say everyone needs to quit their job and start a business or work for themselves. But what I enjoy about side hustling and what I try to get across on my show is that everyone needs to be side hustling anyway, because you cannot put all your eggs into any of these companies. So many of my awesome friends were laid off, in the tech bust over the last few years, where they're getting laid off from places like Google and Meta and places they thought would never lay them off, and amazing jobs they thought were so secure. And there is no security. So how can you make sure that you are keeping your skills fresh and also just exploring things you've always wanted to explore that you just never gave yourself enough time to do, or you just kind of ish on yourself, for lack of a better word? Like, there's so many people who you are the ones telling yourself no. Your company's not telling you no. They might not have a problem with it, but you keep telling yourself no. So that's one of the biggest barriers that I see as well. The made up barriers, like you said yourself, the mental barrier.
Yeah. And there's just different facets. I think top of mind, obviously, you think corporate and career, but there's so many different facets of our lives, whether it's relationships. So many people keep telling themselves, I mean, you're married with 2 beautiful children, but for us out still in these streets, like, oh my gosh, I can't find, all the good men are taken, or no one wants a geriatric millennial, or I have to date a Black man. I have to date it. You can do whatever. I mean, I love Black love. Don't get me wrong. You can do what you want. So I just feel like a lot of times you really have to evaluate what are the barriers what are the real barriers to entry? Look at us sounding like businessy.
Right. Everything comes down. Comes down to a business case study. It's funny. There's an episode of another podcast. Speaking of podcasts that I just listened to, that I'm going to recommend to everyone. On that, it's by Mel Robbins, and I think it's called something like "Letting Go of Negative Thoughts" or something like that. Yeah, let go of negative thoughts and reprogram your mind. And what I love about that episode is she touches on the science of it. It's not like a woo-woo episode where we're just like, oh, positive thinking and, law of attraction or anything like that. Not like there's anything wrong with that. I think there's a space for that, but it's more so making you realize that auto thoughts that you have are something that you can work on. So there are a lot of automatic thoughts that happen in our mind in response to anything that happens in life. And you will do yourself a huge service if you retrain those auto thoughts to be more optimistic than pessimistic, because you are just, you're making yourself miserable if you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was trying to, you have recommended some amazing books to me as well. And I was trying to get into like the scientific, I'm not a researcher or whatnot, but I said a lot of these things can't just be manifestation. All that stuff is wonderful, but what's really like the science behind it? And I think it's, what is it? There's
cognitive biases. First of all, that's a real thing. Like, you have there are different kind of things that your mind will do. So for example, and this is something that we learned in business school as well. So it's like all of this stuff relates to every aspect of society, because if you have an anchor bias, for example, right? If based on how you heard information and who said information, your opinion that you think is out, just your opinion is actually anchored in the first piece of information that you learned and how you learned it. And that informs everything you do, including your business decisions. See, I don't want to get us off on a tangent, but all of these are biases, and we can reset them once we realize what's happening.
Right. So to your point, like you said before, it's one about recognizing what is an actual barrier and what's something that's a bias or something that's self-imposed, identifying, and then trying to work. But it's a lot easier than what it just seemed. It's very hard. It's very hard to reprogram yourself. And a lot of times too, and I don't know if this is within the same realm, but when people say how important representation is, for example, I think they downplay it. Like it can be, we're talking about the Olympics, like Miss Simone, for example. And I see like these little girls looking at her, especially little Black girls. If she wasn't around showing just her greatness, I think, you may grow up thinking if tennis, golf, gymnastics, that's something that I can't do because you don't see it. So that's something that stems from childhood. Or something may have happened to you in another realm that may be traumatic. Hey, I decided to be more spontaneous and look what the hell happened to me. So I'm gun shy with everything else. So it's more than just, I'm not journaling and manifesting and doing yoga. So it's interesting, but difficult.
It's a lot of things, but anything you face can be addressed and overcome. So that's the way I look at it. It's not, so for example, I'm still going to have days when I have a bad mood, but if I recognize it, I can help myself more than when I'm just like refusing to acknowledge it. I can say, you know what, I'm in a bad mood today. Let me take some time and like, let me not expect this of myself and let me not respond to emails today. Or let me not respond to emails in this very moment. Because if I see an email and it annoys me, I'm gonna respond in a certain tone versus when I'm calm and happy again. I can have a higher tolerance for BS and, keep my professionalism and wits about me.
I'm the same way. Like if I see an email, if I know it's from a particular person and I know it's a 97% chance it's going to be some mess, I have to either like literally go outside, get that vitamin D, walk around, just calm my nervous system.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be ashamed of myself when I look at my sent items and say, Brittany, you know better.
Right.
You know better. You're messing
better.
with your paper now because your attitude got in the way. So it's a learning experience. So, Nikayla, you kind of touched on some of this, but like I was saying before, you are, I think, a super avid reader. You're always trying to learn more, even courses I think you told me about that you're taking. So what are some tips or steps besides, like you said, hey, I'm not responding to emails today because my attitude is a little funky, that you take or tools to overcome some of your self-imposed barriers? And if you don't mind sharing, like everyone looks, at least me, this confident, successful, married mom of 2, killing it with her businesses. I think it's super impressive. Entrepreneurship is incredibly hard, but to really put yourself out there, because your product is you. Like people have to connect with you and like you, and you put your family out there, you're out there. So would you mind sharing some things that maybe you are not as confident about that you would say are some self-imposed barriers and how you're working on getting through those?
Sure. So there are 2 parts to the question. So first, I guess I'll start with some barriers that I'm working through. So I'm always working through the mental side of things because, like you said, it's me. I need to show up in my business even when I'm having a bad day. So I need to make sure that my mind is good. And having 2 babies in the last 4 years, and the fact that I personally think that having kids kind of takes like 5 years off your career. And not enough of us are talking about this in terms of just your mind is different. You're not getting enough sleep. Your stamina is a little off. So, I've had to, and I'm doing a lot of work to overcome that. And this is not to in any way complain about having kids, because I enjoy it. I made that decision for that, but it also comes with a lot of proactive taking care of your mental health. Something that I struggle with as an entrepreneur right now, to be transparent, is making money, right? How do I keep making money even when I'm too tired, right? I can't always be showing up in front of the camera. I don't always want to. So it's figuring out what is going to be working in my business long term. What was working 5 years ago might not be working anymore. And I'm navigating that right now. There was a big podcasting bubble burst recently. So again, I'm navigating that as well. And the good thing about it is I have a program, Podcast Moguls, where I teach other podcasters. So people will benefit from what I'm learning and what I go through. But it's not always fun to go through it, right? To say, I joined a network and I was expecting to be making XYZ from sponsorships, and I haven't made even close to that, right? Okay, how am I going to pivot? And stay tuned for the answer.
You're like, I'm learning too. Where I'm just saying, right?
It's like literally in progress. But I heard something today. I was actually, and how I feed my mind is podcasts as well as books. So after I drop my daughter off, I'm coming back, I'm listening to this podcast episode, and the woman says something that is so poignant. She said, I'm going back to my messy and scrappy days, but that does not in any way take away from my expertise. I still know I'm the best person to come to for this and this and this. And the delivery of that may be a little bit messy right now, but I'm still the best person to come to for this. And I was like, I feel that. That is absolutely true.
Okay, Noah Lyles Jr. or Senior, the woman. I mean, you gotta talk. You gotta talk your stuff to yourself first.
I'm the best person to come to learn how to market your podcast and honestly how to market your side hustle in general, because I have had success doing it. I've helped others do it. And there are not enough people who know how to market themselves. Starting something is like 30% of the equation. It's not even 50% of the equation. Like starting your business is just the first part. You have to know how to get that business in front of people. And it actually pains me to see people not doing it well, because I know how much bigger you could be. And so I think it's my life's work to help people with that. And now as I'm getting more energy back, I'm working on how to deliver this to people at scale, that service.
Right. So it seems like, okay, so you spoke about the business side of it. I mean, hello, I can totally relate. I'm always trying to get more coins. Balance. It's all about balance, but that's a challenge, I think, for a lot of people. But recognizing that there's an issue, being confident and reminding yourself that I am that girl, rated G.
Yep.
And then I guess still like what do you say? Because I'm trying to think of things that I have to give myself pep talks, or like when I'm going through a dark season, or you sometimes get so much in your thoughts, just reaching out to friends or family, and then just getting that reminder that, hey, like I said, like, why not me? I'm telling myself these things and I have to remind myself. I remember we had a conversation and I was like, Nikayla, you are so decorated, have all these accomplishments. Like, why don't you ever toot your horn more? You responded in a very humble and diplomatic way and say, that's great, but I am so much more than just that. But I still do think it's important to be like,
yes,
I am.
And that's what I mean in stepping back into that space. So there are a couple of things I want to say here. Okay, so let me like outline out loud. So one, I want to talk about getting my mojo back, going to Essence Fest, and two, the pep talks I give myself. So I think from the outside, I don't even recognize how people view me. Like, when you say this, like, oh, people view me as like so successful, and I'm a husband and kids, and I have a lot of things I guess people aspire to, and because I'm in the day-to-day like grind of it all, I don't view myself that way, right? I'm definitely not perfect. I definitely don't have the perfect life. So I don't view myself that way. So I never really think about it that way. But what I do know is that this season of entrepreneurship, I talked about it in my solo episode, like I've been feeling a little bit forgotten. I feel like as a woman, as a solopreneur, if you're not showing up on your feed every day and being super visible, it just feels like people kind of forget about you. And so I've had to pour a lot of self-talk into myself to remind myself, like, girl, like you got this, like you're awesome, you're great, you're all these things. And one thing that helped me with that is changing up my scenery. So I went to Essence Fest with my sisters, and at first my sister's like, wait, why are you not creating content, all this stuff? And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I felt so out of place. And you see all the influencers and everybody who's been selected to host panels. It felt like that was worlds away from me. It felt like I was a completely different person. And then finally, by day 2, I started feeling like myself again. I started recording, but it was with the encouragement, a lot of encouragement from my sister and my best friend. So I felt completely like a fish out of water. I was like, I don't even know where to begin, because I wasn't invited to anything. I wasn't speaking on any panels. I just felt, like I'm just another person. So what am I even doing content for? And that environment allowed me to remember why I even started a podcast, which was I love Black women. I love amplifying our stories. Like, it was so cool to see all these different shapes, sizes, and everyone's just having fun and looking fine and just doing our thing. And I remembered my why. And then I also got back into the groove of it. It wasn't like some kind of fancy content, but it was good to get back into the groove of creating again. And so that's one thing I recommend, is changing your scenery. You don't have to go to a conference or anything, but go for those walks, do whatever it takes to kind of shake yourself out of the funk.
I completely agree.
This episode is sponsored by Skillshare. The online learning community is offering Side Hustle Pro listeners a free trial of premium membership. Now, many of you already know that one of my biggest side hustle hacks is Skillshare. I've been using Skillshare for years now, and that's because it's the truth. I love it so much, I've created a free short course to give you the play-by-play on how to launch your own high-quality video podcast. It's called The Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Podcasting, and if you've ever wondered how I get the clear, crisp video you see on the Side Hustle Pro podcast without going into a fancy studio, this is the course for you. The Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Podcasting is a course where I'm sharing my favorite budget-friendly equipment picks, my step-by-step training on recording and editing a podcast, and how to create engaging episodes and eye-catching social media clips. The best part, the course is free if you go to sidehustlepro.co/Skillshare. So are you ready to get started? Visit sidehustlepro.co/Skillshare to enroll. Again, Side Hustle Pro listeners, you'll get 1 month free of premium membership over at sidehustlepro.co/Skillshare. Again, that's 1 month free over at sidehustlepro.co/Skillshare. Are you ready to learn how to actually make money from your podcast without needing to rely on downloads or a huge social media following? Well, I am hosting a paid training called How to Make Money Podcasting, and it's happening on Thursday, February 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Here's what I'll be teaching you. Number one, how to avoid the biggest mistakes that make it hard to monetize your podcast. Number two, the different revenue streams that my podcast coaching clients have used to turn their podcast into income-generating platforms without having to rely on downloads. Number three, how to uncover your unique gifts, amplify them with your podcast, and monetize them like a pro. This is the exact system that helped me turn my podcast into a profitable business. And I've shared it with countless podcasters who now have consistent clients and thriving paid communities, all as a result of their podcast and my podcast coaching. So whether you're just starting out or feeling stuck, this is your chance to learn how to podcast as a business, not just a hobby. Save your spot now at sidehustlepro.co/podcast money. That's sidehustlepro.co/podcast money. I can't wait to see you there. Let's get you paid to podcast. All paid registrants will also receive the replay and all worksheets provided.
I agree with you in change of scenery. I just got back from a wonderful family trip from Cabo on Sunday, and I completely felt reinvigorated. And I did a solo out there. You would be proud, because I hadn't done one previously. So it's just like changing your scenery, whether it's a staycation, because sometimes I'll just get an Airbnb in the same city, and just that alone it's just amazing how your mind and neural
I find like some of my best ideas come on airplanes, on trains, like on Amtrak. I just having a moment to sit and just with your thoughts is what we all need. We don't realize how much we're just going back and forth, going through the motions and not sitting with our thoughts, because the ideas come when you're still.
Right. That's true. I think that's why they say it's true. I get some of my best thoughts in the shower, or, doing something just when you are still. And it's like, okay, let me run out with my towel and write this down. But what I wanted to touch upon too, Nikayla, obviously we are two Black women, and I know whether it's scientific or environmental or social conditioning, some of the reasons or barriers that we specifically face that I think a lot of times I don't realize it until I'm just decompressed at home. We talk about microaggressions and we read about that all the time, but there's so much pressure to always be on and present a certain way, and I fall into this trap where I feel like people expect for you to do X, Y, and Z. So if I go out of that zone, like, what are people going to think about me? Or I'm letting down the whole race. I was having a conversation with my sister yesterday and we were like, why only? It just seems like only with, like certain Black people, you're like, oh, I'm glad that the person that did this isn't
not
Black.
The whole race.
I don't want to carry that burden. Right. Like, it's not my burden to carry.
And we don't have to. No, it's not our burden to carry. Honestly, one of the things that helped me with that is stepping away from corporate for so many years. I realized the other day with Olympic chatter, actually, that me being so far removed from some of the constraints and the code switching, the politics of trying to be accepted, being kind of removed from that, I didn't realize how that informs how I act and show up in the world. So to give you an example, with the Olympics around, I see that in different groups that I'm in of Black women, people would be talking about Simone, like, oh, Simone looks great. She's da-da-da-da. I kind of wish her hair would be more slicked back, but blah, blah, blah. It would just be an aside comment. And in my mind, I'm like, nothing's wrong with her hair. Like, it's a loose, messy bun, but she, like, first of all, face beat to the gods. And even if it wasn't, I realized that kind of thinking is actually, to me, white patriarchy. And we need to realize what's happening when we make comments like that, because there's so many times we've been in these spaces and we're like, oh, I hate how as Black women we have to do this and da-da-da. So then why are we then doing it to other Black women? Why are we judging this girl? I'm like, did you just see how many flips this girl just did? She is literally defying physics. And you have the nerve to comment on her hair? Like, first of all, when's the last time you did a jog? Okay? Like, it pisses me off. Okay? Sorry. I feel
the exact same way.
Yeah. But that comes from being removed a little bit from corporate. Because I realize that when you feel like you always have to be on, not a hair can be out of place, you don't realize that you then project it onto the younger generation. You just expect Black girls to be perfect, even when they're literally busting their ass doing flip. Like, you see those girls, they have Band-Aids on almost every freaking limb, right? Like, they are working. They make it look easy, but they are working, okay? So no, her hair can't. It'd be one thing if she goes through the world like that when she's not doing gymnastics, but she comes correct. And I won't even say correct because it's not about correct, but she's in the gym. She's literally working out. Why is the expectation for her to be slicked back, not a hair out of place?
You've said so much. There's so much I want to. It's because they've been bothering Simone with her hair, whether it's her wedding day or when it's just like, and you're right, it's rooted in white supremacy. We're so, I shouldn't say all of us, but I believe it comes from, to your point, we need to make sure that we present so we don't look out of place to the white community. Like, why is your hair like, what? This girl is the most decorated.
And it's like, we have to be like, girl, quick, come here. They might see you. They might think you look like.
Get those edges together. No, like, that's just.
Get those edges together, girl.
It's in. There's no such thing, like you said, come correct, and we have to, like, even our subconscious mind says things like present perfect or come correct, because we're so trained. And I fall into this trap too of, oh my goodness, if I don't assimilate closest to European standards or what's acceptable in the greater society, which is white America, we're not representing well for the people. And it's the same thing. It reminds me when, like,
and we all struggle with it at some degree, because the trauma of what we've been through across the diaspora, we can't escape it. It'll be very hard for it not to be a part of us to some degree. So, someone else can judge me for something I do, but I'm just saying, like, something in particular that I noticed recently, that, like, this is really crazy how we judge. We say we don't want to be judged. We say we want to be able to be this way, but then we go and do it to.
That's a really good point. I think definitely we're our hardest critic. And then second, it's other Black women. I'm not that. I mean, I love Black women, like you said before. I love Black people.
Yeah.
I love them. Hey. But I'm just like, why are we so hard on ourselves? And I don't think it comes from a place of, I'm trying to help you be better. It's, we're out in public. We can't let them, or even certain comments I see, not in front of the white folks. If I want to say this, I want to talk. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm sick of having to perform or say certain things or not say certain things to be accepted by other people. I want to talk about this in a public forum, and that's okay. So it reminds me of people too criticizing Megan Thee Stallion and the Kamala Harris campaign. Like, you are mad that she's I mean, hey, to each their own, but I don't think it comes from you shouldn't be twerking on a campaign. It's because, this makes us look, the stereotypical hypersexual. And I get it, and it's unfair, but why us? Let's just...
I see the perspective, and I think what we need to recognize is anytime we do something, it's magnified. People have been performing for politicians forever. Every time there's a political campaign, politicians, they're pandering. Like, this is not limited to any particular candidate. That's literally how you run. That's called campaigning. You try to get in with every group. That is how a campaign works. Okay. Obama was doing 4 stops a day, they said, like, what do you think he's doing? Going there and just being himself? No, he's going there and he's trying to win you over. And so her Gen Z team or whatever, that's what they told her to do it. I don't think there was anything wrong with that. So that annoyed me too. That was the moment I knew I needed to leave the group chats because it's just going to annoy me. Okay. Because it's like, stay focused on what's at hand. And again, she was just doing a TikTok dance that no one had a problem with until...
Right. It's like... that's a barrier.
You and your nieces were doing that.
You were just doing it. When I dance when I get dressed, like, we're doing it in the privacy. I mean, who knows what we're doing when we're getting dressed? But it's kind of like, no, not in front of
don't tell them what. Don't tell them what
we be doing. Like, right?
Like, you listen to Meg Thee Stallion. Come on, it's deeper than what we can get into here. There are layers to it. I know. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but what I am saying is, it comes back to being able to remove yourself from these spaces. And I want that kind of freedom for my people. Even if it's just taking sabbaticals, like, you got to step away from these spaces because they're tainting your brain. How you respond to everything is being done through the lens of what would my employer think? What would these people think? Blah, 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 blah. And it's limiting what you can do on earth if that's the only lens you ever allow yourself to think through.
That was like a mic drop moment. You're right. It's just, as we're having this conversation, because I looked at it, I know that I was saying like glass ceiling. It's like a glass box, really.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's like, okay, what is a real barrier? Like, if you said, hey, Brittany, can you go out in the Olympics? I can't even do a cartwheel anymore. That's a real barrier. I physically cannot compete with these world-class Olympians. But in terms of this other stuff, like you said, changing scenery, like, I was thinking about, I don't know, like, why don't I move to another city out of the country? Like, literally, there's nothing stopping me. I'm not a tree, but my mind. I'm like, I'm afraid. And if I don't like it, you can always just come back. So I just think there's so many different layers. And like you said, we can't peel back everything, nor is that my responsibility, our calling. But I just feel like it's an important conversation.
Make sure you're doing what's best for you. Like, you can't save the world all the time, but make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the kind of energy that you want to one day embody. If you don't have it yet, every day, 10 minutes, just read a book from your arsenal of, you can call it anything, like your power team or what have you. And I find that ramps me up in low moments, because there are moments where, again, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly thinking about finances, and there are low moments with that. And then I'm like, all right, let me go back to my arsenal. I'll pull up my Audible and I'll start listening to a book, and I won't even get through the whole book. I'll just get through like a chapter. But I find that I get the vitamin dose I need to keep going, to keep pushing.
It's like, what do you call it? Your spiritual gym? in the morning?
Yes, the spiritual gym in the morning. That is how I am supporting myself during a time, because entrepreneurship is also very lonely in terms of there are not a lot of people going through what you're going through at the same time. And when I was in corporate, I could call up my favorite coworker. We could say, all right, let's just go get lunch. I can't do it today. I don't have that anymore. Everyone's even trying to call my bestie. Like, she's busy, at work. I can't just call her midday when I'm free before the kids come home. So it's a very lonely path. And you have to make sure you do whatever it takes to not lose yourself and to not get really sad or depressed. Some people get really depressed on this journey.
You're absolutely correct. You make a good point, Nikayla, because I have certain really, really close friends, but I never in my life even dawned on them any of my entrepreneurial struggles. Because one, quite frankly, I mean, maybe they would pretend that they care. It's more so like you can't relate. I just don't even talk about it.
You can't relate.
Right. So it is a very lonely journey. But to your point, it's so important to have, what did you call it? Your power circle or your board of directors.
Your board of directors. I have a fellow podcaster who we'll text. We used to have like 4 of us, but everyone just kind of like life just kind of, and it just disbanded unofficially. And we're like, what happened to the mastermind? So it's just me and her, a mastermind of 2 now.
Oh, just like like fellow podcasters, or just...
Yeah, it was a fellow podcasters. We had a WhatsApp group, and then we'd also try to meet for Zoom like once a month. And life just took everyone in different directions, and it's really hard to reconvene. Everyone's just doing different things, whether it's move to a different state, writing a book, going on a book tour. Like, it's just too busy.
Life be lifing. Life sometimes will whoop your butt, but you gotta try to get off the ropes and get in your spiritual gym or talk to your smaller board of directors and get back out there. So speaking of books, Nikayla, as we wrap up, what are some of your favorites? Can you give me I'm sure you have more than 3, but what are some of your favorites?
I got to pull up my Audible. So some of my favorite, it's not an all-time thing. I'm not an all-time person. I feed my soul with what I need in the moment. And so you already know that I am on a You Are a Badass kick right now by Jen Sincero. It's just giving me what I need to master my mental, because this year is all about the mental. Every year is about the mental, but this year in particular, I got to get my mind and keep my mind right. Another one I really liked was actually Walk Through Fire by Sheila Johnson. I thought that was
Bob Johnson's ex-wife, right? I did read that. I did like that one a lot.
Yeah, I liked it because, first of all, I love what she's built, what she's doing, and I kind of see it as, this is what I'll be doing when I have millions.
Right, get you your own salamander. Hey,
right. It was like, this is what the future holds for me. And I also so my third that I would recommend is Get Good with Money, especially for us Black women entrepreneurs. Get Good with Money. It's by Tiffany the Budgetnista Aliche. It covers everything from, side hustling and what you can do if you're in debt, getting out of debt, and then the practical things. Like, I used it to figure out the life insurance process as an entrepreneur. So got that tucked away for the kids. And it was really a relief to do that step. So I highly recommend that book. And I think of that as more like a manual. I refer to the different chapters at the time that I need it versus a read it through straight kind of a thing. So those are the life season books that have been helping me right now.
Okay, I like that. You're right. It just depends on the season. If I were to ask you the same question this time next year, who knows what it would be. What role has fear played in your journey, and how have you managed to push through it?
I love this question. I might have to steal this question.
Steal away.
What role has fear? Oh my gosh. I think fear is a part of my journey always. I have not yet mastered not having fear pop up. Fear to me is kind of like the devil. It's kind of like, the good angel, bad angel. Right. And I heard a sermon that really helped recently, in that it was all about talking back to the devil. So basically, when fear pops up, I have learned to talk back. And reading books about mental and programming your brain also helps with that, because the fear will pop up and say, what if this happens? What if that happens? So for example, someone reached out to me to do this speaking engagement that's coming up, and it's like with some heavyweights. There's multiple people there that I want to meet and I haven't met yet. I want to network with because of what he's built in the podcasting world. And the fear in me was telling me, oh, it's not a good time. I got to do this. What am I going to do with the kids? Blah, blah, blah. And then I realized I had to talk back. I'm like, you know what? It's going to work out. We're going to make it work. We're going to find babysitters, because I want us to both go. And that's just what you have to do. You have to talk back to the fear and be like, nope, nope, nope. What if everything works out? Nope. Mm-mm. What if this happens? Nope. Something good is on the way. Like, no, I'm not going to go broke. Working for myself. No. There are going to be hard times, but guess what? This is part of the process. Boom, boom, boom. And so that's how I get through. But fear likes to pop up, I would say weekly, if not daily, but definitely weekly.
And like you said, why not you? Like, you're a heavy hitter too.
I'm a heavy hitter too.
Right. Okay.
I got to remind myself of that too. I got to affirm myself and talk back all the time.
I'm going to borrow that too.
And it works. It works.
Talking back to the, and I when I think of devil too, for me, devil is and now I'm not trying to get deep philosophical, but it's so many things. It's your self-imposed, sometimes negative talk. Like you said, fear is the devil, and talk back, talk your ish, and let them know. And once you remind the devil, it seems to dissipate, but it's a ongoing process. Like, I wish that you can just raid it away and it never comes back.
Exactly.
They keep coming back.
It comes back. It does. It's part of the process, part of life.
Would you say, Nikayla, do you believe, I've done some reading and people have been calling, like if you were gifted back in elementary or middle school,
yes.
What was the quote online? It was like, oh, how are all my gifted women doing that? Like, how is your ADHD or high functioning anxiety? Something like that was so funny to me, because I was like, oh my gosh. And I started doing research and I was like, people hiding behind calling us type A, like, I have high functioning anxiety. Like, because you're always set, they put you in gifted classes. So you're like, oh, I need to be better than the rest. Right. I can't follow my blah, blah, blah. So I was just always curious because like you said, people look at you, I can just speak for myself, in a much brighter light that I'm shocked that you can't even see in yourself. So I want to be one of those people that reaffirm, like, you are that girl, like, don't forget it. So how do you deal with, like, would you say that you have high functioning anxiety? And besides reaffirming yourself and reading your books, I was just curious what other secrets you can share with us that help you push through.
I love this question as well. So I wouldn't say that yet, because I'm honestly not even sure what it looks like. All I know is how I do feel anxious and anxiety sometimes. And I take a moment and I'm like, but I don't know for sure. And a lot of that, they say, it's hard to even diagnose, right? In adult women, ADHD. But sometimes I see those memes or things go by and I'm like, wait, check. Could it be?
That's what happened to me.
So at this point, it's above me, and all I could do is make an appointment with my therapist. Like, I'm overdue for putting regular therapy back into the calendar, because it's like, wait, I don't need to deal with this on my own. I can just talk things out and I'll feel better. So that's a definitely tip, is get a therapist. Like, guys, we are far beyond the point where it should be looked at as, oh, that person has a problem. Oh, something's wrong with that person. No, it's actually, it's almost like having a trainer, but for the mind. It's like, in order to keep yourself good, it's time to have that in your regular health professional rotation, especially as an entrepreneur, especially as a Black woman. So that definitely helps. And one thing that I realized, luckily, I guess early-ish on, when I told you how I grew up in the Bronx, right? So I was in the gifted classes and I also was accepted to a program in my 7th grade going into 8th grade that helps you prepare for this big test they have in New York called the Specialized High School Exams that help you get into one of the top 3 schools in the city. So I'm going to this program and they take kids of color all over the city of New York, all different schools. So I'm in this program thinking we're all at the same level and we're about to all learn and prepare for this test together. And then they start putting up equations on the board that I'd never seen before. And I'm thinking everyone's going to be looking around like, what are y'all talking about? And these kids start raising their hand and solving the equations. And I was like, wait a second now. We didn't learn that in my school yet. And I was 12, realizing that, wow, like this world is not fair. This world's not balanced. Like these kids are getting a whole year heads up on practicing this kind of math before the test. And you know, when my school finally started learning that, I guess it was called like algebra. Yeah. So they didn't start introducing that until like 8th grade, months before the test. Like, guys, the test is coming up in October, right? So if I hadn't gone to this program, I wouldn't have gotten into Bronx High School of Science, which is like a top high school in the city. And that's when I realized that is how my imposter syndrome started. I no longer claim imposter syndrome. That's another thing. You're who you are or what you experience, the nervousness you experience sometimes, it does not define you. You don't have a syndrome. Nothing's wrong with you. It's okay to feel nervous. Nothing's wrong with you. So that was my first exposure to it. And I only unpacked that, I think, in grad school. And I realized, wow, like that is why I can feel so nervous to talk in some of my classes during my MBA program, because I'm worried about looking dumb, because I had the experience of being in a class where everyone else knew the math and I'd never seen it before in my life, and feeling like I don't want them to realize that I don't know. And it took me a while to be comfortable with saying I don't know something, because the little girl in me from the Bronx was afraid of people thinking she was dumb. And so that's taken decades to unpack.
I am so happy you mentioned that. I felt that same exact way, even in classes at Penn. My experience wasn't exactly like yours. And sometimes I try to think, like when I talk to my therapist, they always say, oh, this stems from childhood trauma. I'm like, I'm thinking my childhood was, like you're thinking like I had a good childhood. But obviously, if you really sit back and think, what was the moment that created this fear and insecurity that has carried over to my big old age self? And I think all this money that is being paid for tuition, and I'm too afraid to raise my hand. I have to wait to office hours or wait till everyone else leaves the class because I don't want to look dumb. Is so like I get frustrated and upset with younger self, but I was doing the best that I can. So you're so right. Like just
it ties back into the Black part too again, because you don't want to embarrass your race. Like, oh, of course the Black girl doesn't get this.
You got in because of affirmative action. You don't
affirmative action.
Oh gosh, that's a whole nother. So I knew, I was like, dang. And I'm like, I don't know, especially in stat, that kicked my butt. But anyway, thanks for sharing that.
But I don't know if I answered the question, but I will say that unpacking it and recognizing things is extremely helpful with getting past these kind of blockages that you have.
Absolutely. And so, Nikayla, this is wonderful. And I know anyone who is watching the beautiful orange and she's showing the looking wonderful, who wants to hear more and binge watch your podcasts and videos, how can they find you online?
Yes, you can find me over at sidehustlepro.co. You can find me online across social media at Side Hustle Pro. So don't be afraid to say hi, follow, DM. I'm here. I love talking to new folk.
Nikayla, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me. Hey guys, thanks for listening to Side Hustle Pro. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other side hustlers just like you to find the show. And if you want to hear more from me, you can follow me on Instagram at Side Hustle Pro. Plus, sign up for my 6-bullet Saturday newsletter at sidehustlepro.co/newsletter. When you sign up, you will receive weekly nuggets from me, including what I'm up to, personal lessons, and my business tip of the week. Again, that's sidehustlepro.co/newsletter to sign up. Talk to you soon.